His garage wasn't simply a place where cars were repaired, it was a cathedral for the gods of speed and luxury. Gleaming Ferraris lined the entrance like soldiers standing at attention. Bugattis and Lamborghinis sat on hydraulic lifts, their sculpted bodies reflecting the fluorescent lights above like polished jewels. The air carried a mixture of engine oil, leather, and expensive cologne, a scent Mauricio often said was the smell of power. From his glass-walled office overlooking the shop floor, Mauricio leaned back in a black leather chair, sipping an espresso so dark it looked like liquid night. He watched his mechanics work on a $2.5 million Koenigsegg as though he were an emperor observing his army. In his mind, he wasn't just repairing machines, he was orchestrating perfection. To him, everyone in the room existed to serve that vision and to serve him. The tranquility of his afternoon was interrupted when his receptionist appeared in the doorway, clutching a clipboard. "There's a woman here for the mechanic job?" she said. Mauricio blinked, then slowly grinned. He set his espresso down and adjusted his cufflinks, savoring the absurdity of the statement. "A woman?" His voice was rich with mockery, as if the word itself were a punchline. "Send her in," he said with a dismissive wave. "This'll be fun." Nayara Morales entered like a storm contained in human form. Her boots left faint smudges of dirt on the spotless tile floor as she walked in, her posture firm, her gaze unwavering. Years of working in cramped, low-budget garages had left her clothes faded and her hands scarred, but her spirit was unbroken. In her grip was a neatly folded resume, her golden ticket, or so she hoped. She had spent nights rehearsing what she would say, how she would convince him to give her a chance. She knew the odds were against her, but this was her dream, to work where engines weren't just machines, but masterpieces. Mauricio didn't even bother to reach for the resume. He leaned back, folded his arms, and studied her with the amused detachment of a cat toying with a mouse. "You?" he said finally, his lips curling into a smirk. "A mechanic?" The words hung in the air like smoke, suffocating and bitter. He gestured around the room. "This shop works on cars worth more than your life." Behind him, his three-star mechanics, Patricio, Emiliano, and Rodrigo, paused their work to watch. Patricio, the loudest of the trio, chuckled under his breath. Emiliano tilted his head with an arrogant smirk, and Rodrigo muttered something that made the others laugh harder. To them, Nayara wasn't competition. She was comedy. Mauricio decided to turn her humiliation into entertainment. "Tell you what," he said, striding closer, his Italian loafers clicking sharply against the floor. He spoke loud enough for the entire shop to hear, his voice theatrically confident. "Out back, there's a Porsche 911 with engine trouble. My best mechanics," he gestured to his men with exaggerated pride, "have been working on it for a week, and they still can't fix it." He paused to let the suspense build. Nayara said nothing, only tightening her grip on the resume. "If you can diagnose and repair it in 1 hour," Mauricio continued, "I'll make you my business partner." The room erupted with gasps and murmurs. Even Emiliano, who rarely looked impressed, raised an eyebrow. "And if I fail?" Nayara asked, her voice steady despite the heat rising in her chest. Mauricio's smirk deepened, turning sharp and cruel. "You sign a paper swearing you'll never work as a mechanic again. Ever." The laughter returned, louder this time. Patricio nearly doubled over. Rodrigo muttered, "She's done," while Emiliano shook his head with mock sympathy. For a moment, Nayara hesitated. Everything she had ever worked for was on the line. But then she lifted her chin, squared her shoulders, and said one word with unshakable resolve. "Deal." The test became a spectacle. The Porsche sat under the glaring lights like a silver predator, sleek and menacing. Its hood was propped open, exposing the tangle of wires and machinery that had defeated the shop's so-called experts. Nayara walked around the car slowly, her boots echoing on the concrete. She didn't rush. Her movements were measured, deliberate, like a hunter studying her prey. "She doesn't even know where to start," Patricio jeered, his voice cutting through the tense silence. Emiliano snorted in agreement, while Rodrigo leaned against a pillar, arms crossed, waiting for her to fail. But Nayara wasn't listening. She popped the hood and leaned in, her eyes scanning the engine with a surgeon's precision. Her hands moved lightly over the components, feeling for details that others had missed.
After several minutes, she spoke.
"The problem isn't the injection system," she said evenly, her voice carrying authority. "It's the timing. You used factory specs on a competition-tuned engine." The shop exploded in laughter. Patricio slapped the hood of a nearby car, laughing so hard he doubled over. Emiliano scoffed. "Oh, that's rich," he sneered. Then Don Evaristo, the oldest mechanic in the garage, stepped forward. His weathered face was unreadable, but his voice was calm and steady. "And how do you know that?" he asked. Nayara hesitated briefly, then dropped the bomb. "Because I've worked on Formula One cars." The revelation cracked the room open. Mauricio froze mid-laugh, his smirk faltering into something colder. "You're lying," he snapped, his voice tinged with sudden insecurity. Nayara didn't argue. She simply pulled out her phone and began swiping through photos. She held it up, revealing image after image. Her in Red Bull racing gear, her hands deep in the guts of an F1 engine, her standing proudly beside a pit crew as Verstappen's car blurred past in the background. "I was fired over politics," she said quietly, though her words cut like steel. "Since then, no one hires an overqualified woman." The garage fell silent. Patricio straightened awkwardly, his grin gone. Emiliano's mouth hung open slightly. Even Rodrigo, usually the first to throw in another insult, found himself staring at her phone in stunned disbelief. For the first time, they realized she wasn't here to prove she belonged. She was here to reclaim what had been stolen from her. Then came the repair. Nayara rolled up her sleeves and got to work. Her movements were methodical, almost artistic, as she recalibrated the engine with the ease of someone who didn't just understand machines, but spoke their language. Each twist of her wrench, each adjustment of the timing belt, seemed to breathe new life into the Porsche. The mechanics, who had mocked her minutes earlier, now watched with a strange mix of awe and shame. Even Don Evaristo nodded approvingly, his arms folded as if witnessing the return of something sacred. Finally, she closed the hood, slid into the driver's seat, and turned the key. The Porsche roared to life, its engine purring with the smooth, aggressive hum of a predator unleashed. Mauricio's face turned pale. His empire had just shifted, and he knew it. The aftermath reshaped everything. True to his word, Mauricio made her his business partner, though he did it with the stiff, reluctant handshake of a man forced to swallow his pride. But as the weeks passed, even he couldn't deny her brilliance. Nayara brought order to chaos. She reorganized the garage, streamlined workflows, and introduced techniques the men had never seen before. Her reputation spread like wildfire, attracting elite clients from across the country. Within months, the once untouchable Mauricio Santander found himself relying on her expertise, not just to run the business, but to elevate it. Patricio couldn't handle it. One afternoon, after losing yet another argument with Nayara, he threw down his tools and stormed out, vowing never to work under her. Emiliano and Rodrigo, however, stayed. Under Nayara's guidance, they began to thrive, shedding their arrogance and learning to respect the craft instead of merely surviving it. Then came the biggest triumph of all. McLaren signed Santander and Morales Motorsports as their regional training center. A deal Mauricio once thought impossible was now reality, all because of her. The story closed with poetic justice. At the grand reopening, the shop gleamed brighter than ever, banners rippling in the wind as journalists and clients filled the space. High-performance cars lined the street outside, their engines rumbling like a chorus of approval. Nayara stood front and center, her hands, once mocked for being too delicate for real work, now symbols of triumph. She turned to Mauricio, offering her hand. "Still think women can't be mechanics?" she asked, her voice steady but carrying the weight of everything she had endured. Mauricio chuckled, a genuine smile breaking through for the first time. "Best mistake I ever made," he said, gripping her hand firmly.